There's yard waste all over my fence line again. Your crew did this at 5 this morning.
So? It's biodegradable. Consider it free mulch.
It's on top of a memorial garden. My wife built it.
A memorial garden. Right. It looks like a vacant lot. I've seen homeless camps cleaner than your backyard, Tully.
She thought she was untouchable. 9 years running that HOA, nobody challenged her once.
I have cameras. I have your husband on video.
You can have the Pope on video for all I care. My board, my rules. Now get off my property before I call the police on you.
But she made 2 mistakes. She dumped contaminated waste on my land, and I spent 25 years investigating soil contamination for the federal government. And the poison in that pile? It was already flowing back into her own water supply. My name's Garrett Tully. For 25 years, I worked for the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. The people who show up when soil gets contaminated, when runoff threatens a watershed, when someone's land needs saving. I've tested dirt in 42 states. I've written reports that shut down illegal dump sites and forced developers to spend millions on remediation. I know soil the way a mechanic knows engines. I can smell trouble in a handful of clay. I retired 3 years ago. Not because I wanted to, because my wife Linda got sick and I needed to be home. Pancreatic cancer. 7 months from diagnosis to the end. The fastest, cruelest kind. After she passed, I didn't know what to do with myself. We had 18 acres in Gwinnett County, Georgia. Land my grandfather bought in 1968. Half of it was house and garden. The other half was a native meadow Linda had started restoring 5 years before the diagnosis. Milkweed, coneflower, black-eyed Susan, switchgrass taller than your waist. She planted every single one by hand, on her knees in the red clay, wearing the same pair of garden gloves until the fingers wore through. That meadow was the last project she finished. The last thing she built that was still alive. So I kept it going, watered it, weeded it, talked to it like she used to. Then Briarstone Estates showed up. Not literally. The subdivision had been there since 2014. 140 homes packed behind a stone entrance sign, gated pool, manicured lawns, and a 6-foot wooden fence that ran along my entire eastern property line. It was the kind of neighborhood where every blade of grass got measured and every mailbox had to match. The HOA president was a woman named Shelby Kessler, blonde, heavy-set, always in linen blazers over yoga pants, like she was running a boardroom from her Cadillac Escalade. She'd been in charge since the subdivision opened, 9 years of unchallenged authority. Nobody ran against her, nobody questioned her budgets, and nobody noticed that her husband, Darren Kessler, owned the landscaping company the HOA had been paying since day one. Kessler Premier Landscapes, big green trucks, logo on the door, crews in matching polos, the whole operation. The dumping started in March. I found the first pile on a Tuesday morning. Grass clippings and hedge trimming shoved through a gap in the fence where 2 boards had come loose. I figured it was a mistake, some worker cutting corners on a long day. I cleaned it up, tossed it in my compost bin, didn't think twice. The next week, there was more, a bigger pile, pushed further onto my property. The week after that, 3 wheelbarrow loads of wet leaves and shredded branches dumped right on top of a patch of milkweed that Linda had babied for 2 full growing seasons. I walked over to the subdivision that afternoon. Found Shelby at the community pool house, sitting under an umbrella with a clipboard and a glass of sweet tea. I kept it civil, told her what I'd found, asked her to make sure her landscaping crew stopped pushing waste through the fence. She looked at me over her sunglasses, didn't stand up, didn't apologize. It's organic material, Mr. Tully. It's doing your weeds a favor. Darren was standing behind her, arms crossed, smirking like I'd just complained about the weather. I drove home and parked in the driveway, sat in my truck for 10 minutes, looked out at the meadow, at the milkweed Linda planted the last spring she was strong enough to kneel. Some of it was already flattened under rotting grass. That's the thing about grief. You think you've buried it deep enough. Then someone dumps a pile of trash on the only thing keeping it quiet. The next morning, I sat down at the kitchen table and wrote a formal letter. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. Addressed to the Briarstone Estates HOA Board of Directors. I laid it out clearly. Dates, descriptions, photographs printed on plain paper. A polite but firm request to cease all dumping on my property and reimburse me for cleanup costs. I included a copy of Georgia Code Section 16-7-53, which makes it a misdemeanor to dump waste on someone else's land without written permission. Fine up to $1,000, up to 12 months in jail. I sealed the envelope, pressed the stamp flat with my thumb, and drove it to the post office myself. I mailed it on a Wednesday. The green receipt card came back the following Monday, signed by S. Kessler. 2 weeks passed. No response. No call, no apology. The kitchen phone sat on the counter like a prop in a play nobody was performing. Then the letter arrived. It came on HOA letterhead, printed on heavy cream stock with the Briarstone Estates logo embossed at the top. Shelby's signature at the bottom, all loops and flourishes. No mention of my complaint. No acknowledgement of the dumping. Instead, the letter informed me that my property had been identified as a visual nuisance affecting home values in the Briarstone community. Overgrown vegetation, unkempt appearance, failure to maintain curb-appropriate landscaping standards. I was given 30 days to address the condition or face further action. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time, standing at the mailbox in the afternoon sun, feeling the Georgia humidity settle on my neck like a wet towel. A mockingbird sang from the power line above me, running through its stolen catalog of other birds' songs. Even the wildlife around here was faking it. She hadn't just ignored my complaint, she'd flipped it. She was using the mess her own crew created as the basis for a complaint against me. I set the letter on the kitchen counter and poured myself a glass of water. I've dealt with people like this before. Developers who blame the farmer when runoff from their construction site kills a trout stream. They don't respond to reason. They respond to consequences. A week later, a White County truck pulled up my driveway. Deputy Tom Briscoe from Gwinnett County Code Enforcement stepped out. Clipboard, county polo, mirrored sunglasses, the whole package. Shelby had filed a formal nuisance complaint against me with the county. Briscoe walked the property line with me. He looked at the meadow. He looked at the fence. He crouched down and touched the native switchgrass. "This is a pollinator restoration project?" "My wife started it," I said. 5 years of work. He stood up, dusted the red clay off his knees, and shook his head. "Mr. Tully, I don't see a violation here. Native plantings on agricultural land aren't a code issue. I'm going to dismiss this." I thanked him. We shook hands. But before he climbed back into his truck, he paused and looked at me with the tired expression of a man who'd seen this before. "You're the 4th person she's filed on this year. Every single one got dismissed." That sentence landed harder than the complaint itself, because it told me something I hadn't fully understood yet. Shelby Kessler wasn't just being difficult. She was running a pattern. Filing complaints was her weapon, not because she expected them to stick, but because the process itself was the punishment. She wanted people to feel the weight of the county showing up. She wanted them to think twice before pushing back. I watched Briscoe's truck disappear down the gravel road, taillights blinking red through the dust. The cicadas screamed from the tree line. The air smelled like warm pine sap and cut grass. Her crew's mowers running again, right on schedule, right on the other side of my fence. That evening, I opened my laptop and started a file. I labeled it Briarstone. I saved every date, every photo, every piece of correspondence. I scanned the certified mail receipt and the green return card. I scanned Shelby's letterhead response. I typed out Deputy Briscoe's exact words. The cursor blinked on the screen like a heartbeat. I saved the file and closed the laptop and sat in the kitchen, listening to the house settle around me. Here's something most people don't realize. In Georgia, pattern harassment through repeated false complaints can be grounds for a restraining order and civil damages under OCGA Section 16, 1139.2. 4 dismissed complaints in 1 calendar year isn't just annoying, it's a paper trail. And paper trails are my specialty. I didn't know yet how deep this would go. I didn't know about the money, the chemicals, or the poison running back into their own water. All I knew that night was that Shelby Kessler had just taught me the rules of her game, and I was about to play it a whole lot better. The dumping didn't stop. It got worse. After my certified letter went ignored and the county complaint got dismissed, Shelby must have felt bulletproof, because now the crews weren't even waiting for daylight. I started finding fresh piles at 5:30 in the morning, wet grass clippings steaming in the dawn humidity, stacked 3 feet high against my fence, pushed through the same gap where the boards had loosened. The smell hit you before you saw it. Sweet and rotten, like fruit left in a hot car for a week. Gnats swarmed the pile in thick gray clouds. You could hear them buzzing from 20 feet away. I bought 3 trail cameras, Stealth Cam brand, infrared capable, motion activated, time stamped to the second. I mounted them at different angles along the fence line, one on a fence post, one strapped to an oak at chest height, one tucked behind a water trough where no one would notice it. Total cost, about $400. Best money I ever spent. Within 1 week, the cameras told me everything. 4 separate dumping events, all between 5:15 and 6 in the morning, all captured in crisp infrared. And in every single frame, the truck had the same logo on the door. Green lettering, clean font, unmistakable. Kessler Premier Landscapes. The workers wore matching polos, dark green with KPL stitched over the chest pocket. But the footage showed me something else, something Shelby didn't expect me to catch. In 2 of those 4 dumps, the man behind the wheel wasn't some low-level crew member cutting corners. It was Darren Kessler himself, Shelby's husband, the owner of the company. Backing the truck up to my fence line at 5:22 in the morning, headlights cutting through the fog, tailgate dropping with a metal clang that echoed across the meadow. He wasn't acting on his own. He was running the operation. The next board meeting was held on a Thursday evening in the Briarstone Community Center. Folding chairs, fluorescent lights, a fold-out table at the front with 5 board members behind it. Shelby sat in the middle, reading glasses perched on her nose, a stack of printed agendas in front of her. About 20 homeowners scattered across the room. The air conditioner rattled in the ceiling, struggling against the heat outside. Someone's phone buzzed on silent, vibrating against a metal chair leg like a trapped wasp. I asked for the floor during public comments. Shelby hesitated, then waved me forward like she was granting a favor. I kept it simple, showed the photos on my phone, zoomed in, clear as day. Kessler Premier trucks, KPL uniforms, timestamps, GPS coordinates on my property. 4 incidents in 7 days. Shelby's face didn't change. She didn't even blink. Those workers acted on their own, she said. The board never authorized dumping on anyone's property. We'll handle this internally. She turned to Connie Hargrove, the board secretary, and said, "Note it for the record. Unauthorized crew action. Follow-up pending." Then she moved to the next agenda item, like I'd reported a broken sprinkler head. I sat back down. I didn't argue, because I already knew something she didn't know I knew. In 2 of those 4 camera clips, the driver was her husband, not a crew member, not a subcontractor. Darren Kessler, owner, husband. The man whose company was being paid by the very board his wife controlled. And I had him on camera, at 5 in the morning, personally dumping waste on my land. Acted on their own wasn't a defense. It was a confession, gift-wrapped in a lie. After the meeting, an older man caught up with me in the parking lot. Wade Pennington. Retired, lived on the eastern edge of the subdivision, his backyard backing up to the same fence line about 200 yards south of mine. The parking lot lights cast long orange shadows across the asphalt. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked twice and went quiet. "I've seen that truck," he said, hands in his jacket pockets, voice low. "Been seeing it since at least last fall. Early mornings. Figured you gave him permission." "I didn't," Wade nodded slowly. "Then you've got a problem, and so does she." I drove home that night with the windows down. The air smelled like pine needles and warm asphalt. I pulled into my driveway, killed the engine, and sat in the dark. The cameras were still running. The file on my laptop was growing. And Shelby Kessler had just looked a room full of people in the eye and lied about her own husband. I didn't need her to tell the truth. I just needed her to keep lying while the evidence stacked up. Shelby didn't just deny the dumping. She went on offense. Within 2 weeks of that board meeting, a petition appeared in the Briarstone Estates Facebook group, Concerned Residents for Community Standards. 63 digital signatures calling on Gwinnett County to force me to clean up my abandoned and overgrown property. The petition described my land as a pest-breeding eyesore that was dragging down home values. It included 3 photographs of my fence line, all shot from the subdivision side, all carefully framed to show the mess her own crew had created, with none of the Kessler Premier trucks visible. 63 people signed it. Most of them had never stepped foot on my property. Most of them had never spoken a word to me. They just saw a post from their HOA president, read the words, property values, and clicked the button. Shelby also reached out to the county commissioner's office directly, requesting an expedited inspection of my land for potential zoning violations. She wanted them to reclassify my 18 acres from agricultural to residential, which would have forced me to comply with the same landscaping standards as the subdivision. It was a smart play. If it worked, my meadow would become a code violation overnight. But the zoning board rejected it. Agricultural designation since 1968. No basis for reclassification. One board member even noted that native habitat restoration projects were specifically encouraged under Georgia's conservation incentive programs. Shelby's petition went nowhere. That should have been the end of it. But Shelby Kessler didn't know how to stop. I found it on a Saturday morning. I walked the fence line like I did every week, checking the trail cameras, pulling memory cards, scanning for new damage. The dew was still heavy on the grass. My boots left dark prints in the wet soil. A cardinal called from the oak at the property corner. 2 sharp notes, then silence. When I reached the south section, the stretch closest to Linda's original plantings, I stopped. A strip 40 feet wide along the fence was dead. Not wilting, not drought-stressed. Dead. Every plant in that zone had turned yellow-brown overnight, leaves curling inward, stems collapsing like they'd been boiled from the roots up. The native grasses, the coneflowers, the asters, all of it, gone. And cutting through the destruction like a chemical signature was a smell I recognized from 2 decades of field work. Sharp, acrid, almost metallic. Industrial herbicide. Not the kind you buy at a hardware store. Commercial-grade glyphosate applied at concentrations strong enough to kill everything it touched and sterilize the soil beneath it. Someone had sprayed along the fence line from the subdivision side. Deliberately, systematically, in a straight line that could only have come from a backpack sprayer walking the perimeter. I crouched down and pulled a dead milkweed stem from the soil. It came up with no resistance. The roots were mush. This wasn't overspray from a careless mowing crew. This was targeted. And in that 40-foot kill zone were 12 milkweed plants, the last ones Linda planted, the ones she put in the ground during her final spring, when she still had enough strength to kneel, but not enough to stand back up without help. I held that dead stem for a long time. The morning was quiet. No birds, no bees. Even the insects had abandoned the dead zone. The air above it tasted like burnt plastic. I turned the stem in my fingers and remembered Linda pressing the roots into the clay, tamping the soil with the heel of her palm, saying, "They'll come back stronger next year." She was talking about the milkweed, but I think she was also talking about herself. I pulled soil samples from 6 points within the kill zone and sealed them in labeled bags, force of habit from 1,000 USDA site assessments. I photographed everything, measured the dimensions, noted the wind direction and the angle of application. Then I called Wade. "I need you to come look at something," I said, "and I need you to be a witness." Wade stood at the edge of the dead strip and didn't say anything for a full minute. He just looked at it. Then he looked at the fence. Then he looked at me. "That's not an accident," he said. "No," I said, "it's not." I went home and opened the Briarstone file. I added the photos, the soil sample labels, the measurements, the witness statement. But I also added something else. A note to myself. This wasn't a fence dispute anymore. This wasn't a neighbor being careless. Shelby Kessler had escalated from dumping trash to poisoning land. She'd destroyed the last living thing my wife put into the ground. From that point forward, I wasn't just keeping records. I was building a case. For 25 years at the USDA, my job was reading soil the way a doctor reads blood work. Every sample tells a story. What's been added, what's been stripped, what's been buried. So when I packed those sealed bags from the kill zone and drove them to the University of Georgia Extension Lab in Athens, I already had a suspicion. The lab just confirmed it. The results came back 10 days later in a manila envelope. I sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and opened the first page. The coffee went cold before I finished reading. Chlorpyrifos, an organophosphate insecticide. The EPA restricted it for residential use in 2021 because it causes neurological damage, especially in children. You can still use it on certain commercial agricultural operations if you hold a restricted use applicator license. But spraying it on subdivision lawns where kids play barefoot in the summer? Illegal. Mixing it into residential yard waste and dumping that waste on someone else's property, that's not just a violation. That's an environmental contamination event with criminal liability. Kessler Premier Landscapes had been treating the Briarstone lawns with a banned pesticide. and then hauling the contaminated clippings across my fence line and piling them on my land. But that wasn't the only thing hiding in the numbers. Georgia's Property Owners Association Act gives every homeowner the right to inspect HOA financial records. It's right there in OCGA Section 44-3-232. The HOA has 10 business days to comply after a written request. Most people don't know this law exists. I spent 25 years working with federal records. I know exactly how to ask. I sent the request by certified mail. Shelby stalled for 3 weeks, claiming the records were being audited, then being reorganized, then temporarily unavailable due to a software migration. Finally, after I cited the statute and copied the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division, she produced 4 years of financial statements in 2 banker's boxes delivered to my front porch without a word. I spent 2 evenings at the kitchen table going through them, line by line, yellow legal pad next to me, calculator running. And there it was. Every month for 4 years, the HOA had billed homeowners a combined $4,200 for yard waste hauling and commercial disposal. That comes to $50,400 per year. Over 4 years, $201,600. I pulled every invoice from Kessler Premier Landscapes attached to those records. Hauling charges, yes. Crew hours, yes. Equipment fees, yes. But commercial disposal receipts? Not a single one. No landfill tickets, no transfer station records, no weigh station printouts, nothing. Because there was no disposal. The waste wasn't going to a facility, it was going over my fence. Shelby and Darren had been collecting over $4,000 a month from their neighbors for a service they never performed, and pocketing the difference. The landscaping company Darren owned was being paid by the board his wife controlled, for work that consisted of driving a truck 200 yards and dumping it on a widower's land. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time after I finished the math. The coffee was ice cold. The house was silent except for the ceiling fan clicking overhead. Outside, the trail cameras were still recording. The dead strip along the fence was still brown. They weren't just dumping yard waste, they were running a fraud scheme. And I was the only person holding evidence on both sides. The contamination in the soil and the money that never reached a disposal facility. I closed the financial file, opened a new folder on my laptop, labeled it Briarstone, Phase 2. I spent the next 6 weeks moving quietly. No confrontations, no phone calls to Shelby, no posts, no letters, no public accusations. Just work. The kind of slow, methodical, evidence-gathering work I'd done for a quarter century. Except this time, the contamination site was my own backyard. Step 1 was the Georgia Environmental Protection Division. I filed a formal complaint documenting the illegal dumping of yard waste containing chlorpyrifos, a restricted-use pesticide, on private agricultural land without landowner consent. I attached the UGA lab results, the trail camera footage with timestamps, the GPS coordinates of every dump site, and a topographic survey showing the drainage pattern from my property down into the Briarstone retention pond. EPD assigned it a case number within 5 business days. Step 2 was the Georgia Department of Agriculture. Chlorpyrifos requires a restricted-use pesticide applicator license for any legal application. I pulled public records on Kessler Premier Landscapes. Darren Kessler held a standard commercial applicator license, not a restricted-use one, which meant every time his crew sprayed chlorpyrifos on those Briarstone lawns, they were violating Georgia Pesticide Use and Application Act, OCGA Section 27101. That's not a slap on the wrist. That's a license revocation and potential criminal referral. Step 3 was the money. I hired Cal Strickland, a forensic accountant out of Duluth, who specialized in HOA fraud. And believe me, in Georgia, that's a growth industry. I gave Cal the 4 years of financial records, the Kessler Premier invoices, and the bank statements Shelby had been forced to include. His job was simple: follow the disposal money. Where was it supposed to go? Where did it actually go? And how much of it ended up in the Kessler's pockets? Step 4 was a licensed land surveyor. I needed the contamination zone measured, mapped, and documented to professional standards. Acreage affected, soil depth impacted, estimated volume of waste dumped. That report would become the foundation for any civil claim. Step 5 was political, not the kind you see on TV, the quiet kind. I reached out individually to 3 Briarstone board members who'd shown discomfort during the meeting where Shelby dismissed my evidence. Connie Hargrove was first. I didn't pressure her. I didn't ask her to take sides. I just showed her the financial numbers, the $200,000 in disposal fees collected with 0 disposal receipts, and let her sit with it. She stared at the spreadsheet for a long time. Then she said, very quietly, "I voted to approve those budgets. Every year." She told us everything was handled. The other 2 board members had similar reactions. Shock, then anger. Then the slow realization that they'd been signing off on a fraud they didn't know existed. But the 6th piece, the one that changed everything, came from a topographic drainage map I pulled from the Gwinnett County GIS database. I'd spent decades reading water flow patterns for the USDA. It's one of the first things you learn. Water doesn't care about property lines. It follows gravity, and the contour lines on that map told a story Shelby Kessler never imagined. My land sits slightly uphill from the southern edge of Briarstone Estates. The dump zone, where her crew piled the contaminated waste, slopes gently downhill toward a man-made retention pond at the back of the subdivision. That pond was built by the developer as a stormwater feature, but over the years, the HOA had connected it to their automatic irrigation system. Every lawn sprinkler in Briarstone pulled water from that pond, which meant every rain event was washing chlorpyrifos residue from the dump pile on my land straight into the water source that fed their sprinklers. I drove to the pond on a Tuesday afternoon, collected water samples at 3 points, inlet, center, and outlet, sealed them in lab-grade containers and drove them to UGA Extension the same day. The results came back a week later. Chlorpyrifos detected in all 3 samples, levels exceeding EPA residential safety thresholds. The Briarstone Estates homeowners, all 140 of them, had been irrigating their lawns with pesticide-contaminated water, the same pesticide their own landscaping company applied illegally, carried by the same waste their HOA president ordered dumped on my land. Their lawns were being poisoned by their own waste cycle, and nobody knew it except me. I picked up the phone and called Rita Sams at WSB-TV. "I've got a story about water contamination affecting 140 families," I said, "and the HOA president is at the center of it." She said, "When can we meet?" Shelby found out I'd pulled the financial records. I don't know who told her. Maybe the accountant she used. Maybe one of the board members I hadn't spoken to yet. But within 10 days of my records request, she called an emergency board meeting. The agenda had one item: a proposed amendment to the Briarstone Estates bylaws, restricting homeowner access to financial records. Under the new rule, any records request would require a statement of justifiable purpose, pre-approval by the board president, and a 14-day review period before documents could be released. In other words, Shelby wanted to make herself the gatekeeper of the evidence against her. Connie Hargrove voted against it. She argued it violated the spirit of the Property Owners Association Act. But the other 3 board members, 2 of whom had been Shelby's allies for years, voted yes. The amendment passed 3-2. It didn't matter. I already had the records. And Georgia state law supersedes HOA bylaws. You can't amend your way out of a statute. But the vote told me something important about Shelby's state of mind. She wasn't planning a defense. She was building walls. And people who build walls are people who know what's behind them. 3 days after the vote, Darren Kessler showed up at my property. I was replacing a fence post near the south gate when I heard boots on gravel. I looked up, and there he was, 6'1", tan Carhartt jacket, wraparound sunglasses. The kind of man who never learned the difference between confidence and intimidation. He stopped about 8 feet away, close enough to make a point, far enough to claim he wasn't threatening. "Garrett," he said it like we were old friends, "we need to talk." I set the post hole digger down and faced him. Didn't step closer, didn't step back. "You've been pulling records, talking to board members, filing complaints." He took off his sunglasses and squinted at me. "I get it. You're upset about the yard waste. We'll clean it up. But you need to stop digging around in things that aren't your business. We've been good neighbors to you. Don't make this ugly." I looked at him for a long moment. The afternoon sun was behind him, throwing his shadow across my boots. A red-tailed hawk circled slow and silent over the tree line. Somewhere in the subdivision, a lawnmower hummed. "Your trucks have been dumping on my land for over a year," I said. "That is my business." He put his sunglasses back on, turned around, and walked back to his truck without another word. The door slammed. The engine started. Gravel popped under his tires as he pulled away. I went inside and wrote down every word of the conversation. Date, time, location, exact quotes, body language, direction he approached from, direction he left. In a federal investigation, contemporaneous notes written within an hour of an event carry almost as much weight as a recording. Old habit. That evening, Connie Hargrove called me. "I voted against the bylaws change," she said. "You already know that, but I need to tell you something else. I've been on this board for 6 years, and Shelby has pushed out 2 members before me. Both of them asked questions about the budget. One family sold their house and moved to Forsyth County. The other just stopped coming to meetings." She paused. I could hear her breathing. Then she said, "Tell me what you found." I told her about the disposal fees, the $201,000 collected with no disposal receipts, the gap between what homeowners paid and what Kessler Premier actually invoiced for. I didn't editorialize. I just read her the numbers. She was quiet for 10 seconds. Then she said, "Dear God." I gave her time. This is how it works when people realize they've been lied to. Not with anger first, but with silence. The anger comes later. "There's more," she said, her voice steadier now. "Last year, Shelby approved 3 payments under miscellaneous, community improvement. $18,000 total. No invoices, no receipts, no board vote. I asked about it once, and she told me it was a drainage project behind the pool house." She paused. "There's no drainage project behind the pool house." I added it to the file. $18,000 in ghost expenditures, timed perfectly with the Kessler's kitchen renovation. New cabinets, quartz countertops, a 6-burner range I could see from the sidewalk. The walls Shelby was building weren't keeping me out. They were trapping her inside. Shelby's next move was a full-scale information war. The Briarstone Estates Facebook group, 312 members, mostly homeowners and their spouses, lit up on a Sunday evening with a post from Shelby's personal account. She'd written it like a neighborhood alert. Professional tone, concerned language, just enough venom to land without looking petty. "Some of you may have heard that a neighboring property owner has been making inquiries about our community finances. I want to assure every Briarstone family that our books are clean, our budgets are transparent, and our board operates with full integrity. Unfortunately, this individual, who is not a member of our association, appears to be pursuing a personal grievance disguised as concern for our community. We will not be intimidated by outside interference." 67 likes, 41 comments, most of them supportive. A few used words like harassment and lawsuit. One woman suggested I was trying to extort the HOA for a settlement. None of them had seen a single financial document. Not one of them had asked to see one either. That's the thing about a well-run echo chamber. You don't need facts. You just need someone confident enough to tell you not to look. The next day, a cease and desist letter arrived at my mailbox from a law firm in Lawrenceville, sent on behalf of the Briarstone Estates Homeowners Association. It accused me of tortious interference with community governance, demanded I cease all contact with board members, and threatened litigation if I continued disseminating unverified financial allegations. The paper was thick, the letterhead was embossed. The signature was stamped in blue ink to look important. I read it on my porch with a glass of sweet tea and almost laughed. In 25 years of federal work, I'd received more threatening letters than birthday cards. This one had the legal weight of a parking ticket. No judge in Georgia would enforce a cease and desist that attempted to block a citizen from requesting public records guaranteed by state statute. But it wasn't designed for a judge. It was designed for me. Shelby wanted me to feel the pressure of legal letterhead and hope I'd flinch. I didn't flinch. I filed the letter in the Briarstone folder and kept working. Her third move was zoning. She contacted the Gwinnett County Planning Commission, different from code enforcement, and requested a formal review of my property's agricultural designation. Her argument was creative. Since my land sat adjacent to a residential development, and since I wasn't operating a commercial farm, the agricultural zoning was obsolete and should be converted to residential suburban. If approved, I'd be subject to landscaping ordinances, setback requirements, and potentially HOA adjacent aesthetic standards. The Planning Commission reviewed her request at their monthly meeting. I attended but didn't speak. I didn't need to. The commission chair noted that the parcel had been continuously designated agricultural since 1968, that native habitat restoration qualifies as an approved agricultural use under Georgia conservation programs, and that a third-party petition to reclassify someone else's property requires extraordinary justification that was not present. Request denied, unanimously. Meanwhile, Cal Strickland finished his forensic analysis. The report was 47 pages. I held it in my hands and felt the weight of it, literally and otherwise. The printer had been running for 6 minutes straight, and the pages were still warm. I sat down at the kitchen table and turned to the summary page. The numbers were worse than I expected. The headline numbers: $207,400 in yard waste disposal fees collected from homeowners over 4 years. Kessler Premier Landscapes invoiced the HOA $13,200 per year for hauling services, but those invoices never included a disposal line item. The net gap, money collected for disposal that was never performed, totaled $154,600. On top of that, Darren's hauling invoices included inflated crew hour charges that added another $28,000 in overcharges. And then there were the 3 miscellaneous payments, totaling $18,000, with no documentation, no board approval, and no corresponding project. Total confirmed financial discrepancy: $200,600. Cal included a note at the end of the report. In my professional opinion, the pattern of billing, the absence of third-party disposal records, and the sole signatory structure of the HOA operating account are consistent with a sustained misappropriation scheme. I closed the report and set it on the table. Outside, the late afternoon light was turning gold through the kitchen window. I could see the fence line from where I sat. The dead strip was still there, 40 feet of brown in a sea of green. Linda's milkweed, gone. $200,000, gone. And the woman responsible was still posting on Facebook about community integrity. I met with Lena Whitfield from Georgia EPD the following Wednesday. She'd already reviewed my environmental complaint and the UGA lab results. Now I gave her Cal's report, the trail camera footage, the soil survey, and the water samples from the retention pond. She flipped through the forensic report, paused on the summary page, and looked up at me. "You've done this before," she said. "For 25 years," I said. "Just never on my own land." She closed the folder. "We're opening a formal investigation. I'll need you at the next HOA meeting." The Briarstone Estates annual meeting was held on the second Thursday of October, 7:15 in the evening, in the community center next to the pool house. Shelby had promoted it for weeks, posting in the Facebook group, sending email blasts, even putting flyers on windshields at the mailbox kiosk. She framed it as a community unity night, with a vote on new landscaping standards and a discussion about protecting Briarstone from outside interference. She meant me. It worked. 110 homeowners showed up, the highest attendance in the subdivision's history. Folding chairs packed so tight people were standing along the walls. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, turning everyone's skin a flat, pale white. The air smelled like burnt coffee from the industrial pot someone had plugged in near the exit. Shelby opened the meeting at 7:20. White blazer, hair freshly blown out, reading glasses low on her nose. She had a PowerPoint loaded, 12 slides about community standards, property value protection, and fiscal responsibility. She spoke for 11 minutes without mentioning money once. I walked in at 7:31. I wasn't alone. Behind me came Lena Whitfield from Georgia EPD, wearing a navy blazer with a state ID clipped to her pocket. Next to her was Deputy Tom Briscoe from County Code Enforcement, in uniform, and behind them, Rita Sams from WSB-TV, camera operator at her shoulder, red record light already glowing. The room went quiet, not gradually, all at once. 110 people turning in their folding chairs, the plastic seats squeaking against the tile floor like a chorus of mice. Shelby's jaw tightened. She gripped the podium with both hands. "This is a private meeting," she said. "Press is not welcome here." I stepped to the front of the room. Under Georgia's Open Meetings Act, HOA annual meetings held with a quorum present are subject to member observation rights. The press was invited by a homeowner. I looked at Connie Hargrove. She nodded. Shelby didn't move, but her knuckles were white on the podium edge. I asked for the floor. Connie seconded. Shelby had no procedural grounds to refuse. I spoke for 9 minutes. No notes, no emotion, just evidence, presented the same way I'd presented contamination findings to EPA review boards for 25 years. First, the trail camera footage. Projected on the screen, Shelby had set up for her own PowerPoint. 4 clips: Kessler Premier Trucks, Darren Kessler behind the wheel, timestamp and GPS overlay. 5 in the morning, my property. Second, the UGA lab results. Chlorpyrifos, a restricted-use pesticide banned for residential application, found in soil samples from the dump zone on my property, applied by a company whose owner did not hold a restricted-use applicator license. Third, Cal Strickland's forensic report. $207,400 in disposal fees collected from homeowners. 0 commercial disposal receipts. $154,600 unaccounted for. $18,000 in undocumented miscellaneous payments. Sole signatory on the HOA account, Shelby Kessler. The room was dead silent. I could hear the coffee pot gurgling in the corner. Then I put up the last slide. This is the water quality report from your retention pond, the one that feeds every sprinkler system in this subdivision. I let the numbers sit on the screen. Chlorpyrifos detected at levels exceeding EPA residential safety thresholds. The contaminated yard waste that was dumped on my property has been washing downhill into your irrigation water for at least 2 years. I paused, looked at the room. Your lawns aren't dying because of drought. They're not dying because of grubs or fungus. They're dying because the waste your HOA dumped on my land has been poisoning your own water supply. You've been paying $4,000 a month for someone to contaminate your own neighborhood. 5 seconds of silence. Then the room erupted. Lena Whitfield stood up. Georgia EPD has opened a formal investigation. Kessler Premier Landscapes will receive a notice of violation today for unauthorized use of a restricted pesticide and illegal disposal of contaminated materials. Deputy Briscoe stepped forward. The county has referred the financial discrepancies to the district attorney's office. Shelby grabbed her purse, tan leather, oversized, and tried to move toward the side door. Connie Hargrove blocked her path. Not physically, just procedurally. I'm calling a vote of no confidence, Connie said into the microphone. All in favor? The count was 94-3. Shelby, Darren, and one friend whose name nobody remembered by the next morning. Shelby walked out through the front door, heels clicking on tile. Rita Sam's camera followed her across the parking lot. She never turned around. The fluorescent lights hummed, the coffee pot hissed, and 107 people sat in their folding chairs, staring at the screen, realizing their perfect lawns had been dying from the inside out. The fallout came fast. Gwinnett County charged Shelby Kessler with theft by conversion, a felony under Georgia law when the amount exceeds $5,000. $207,000 was well past the line. She also faced a misdemeanor count for illegal dumping under Georgia Code 16-7-53. Darren Kessler was charged separately, illegal application of a restricted-use pesticide without proper licensure, and a second count of illegal dumping. Their attorney negotiated. It didn't help much. Kessler Premier Landscapes lost its state business license within 60 days. The Georgia Department of Agriculture revoked Darren's commercial applicator certification permanently. The company that had mowed every lawn in Briarstone Estates for 9 years was done. And then came the part nobody expected, the lawns. The new HOA board, with Connie Hargrove as interim president, hired an independent landscaping company to assess the damage. Their report was brutal. Chlorpyrifos residue had accumulated in the retention pond sediment over at least 3 growing seasons. Every sprinkler zone in the subdivision had been distributing contaminated water. The top 4 inches of soil across 70% of the community's common areas showed pesticide levels that exceeded safe thresholds for residential turf. The remediation estimate, $340,000. Soil removal and replacement in the worst zones. Pond draining, dredging, and filtration system installation. 18 months of monitored recovery before the irrigation system could be reconnected. The cost was split across 140 households as a special assessment, roughly $2,400 per home, on top of the HOA dues they were already paying, for lawns that would look brown and patchy for 2 full seasons while the soil healed. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. The WSB-TV segment aired the night of the annual meeting. Rita Sams led with the retention pond footage and the lab results. It ran 4 minutes, an eternity in local news. The story got picked up by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, then by a regional AP wire. For about 2 weeks, Briarstone Estates was the most famous subdivision in Gwinnett County, and not for its curb appeal. Shelby and Darren put their house on the market in November. It sold below asking. They moved to a rental in Hall County. I heard Shelby tried to join the HOA at her new complex. She was turned down. My civil claim against Kessler Premier's insurance carrier settled for $85,000, covering soil remediation on my property, replacement cost for destroyed native plants, lab fees, surveyor fees, and Cal Strickland's forensic work. I didn't ask for pain and suffering. I didn't need to. The money was for the land. I used part of it to finish what Linda started. I replanted the 40-foot kill zone along the fence with native milkweed, goldenrod, and aster. I expanded the meadow by 2 full acres, using seed stock from the Georgia Native Plant Society. I installed a gravel walking path through the center with a wooden bench at the highest point, the spot where Linda used to sit and watch the monarchs come through in October. And I took the rest of the settlement and created the Linda Tully Native Habitat Fund, a small grant program administered through UGA Extension that helps Gwinnett County homeowners convert portions of their conventional lawns to native pollinator gardens. The first year, 14 families applied. 3 of them were from Briarstone Estates. The county certified my meadow as a registered pollinator habitat site. They put a green metal sign at the entrance to my property with Linda's name on it. I drive past it every morning. Last spring, Connie Hargrove knocked on my door. She was holding a potted milkweed plant. "For the meadow," she said, "if you'll take it." I did. Some evenings, when the light gets low and the air cools down, I sit on that bench in the middle of the meadow and watch the fireflies come out. Wade brings a couple of beers sometimes. We don't talk much. We don't need to. The grass in Briarstone is starting to come back. Patchy, but alive. A few of the homeowners wave when they see me at the fence line now. One guy asked me what kind of flowers Linda planted. I told him. He ordered seeds the next week. That's how it starts. Not with revenge, with something growing back.
You know what beat Shelby Kessler? It wasn't money. It wasn't lawyer. It wasn't even the cameras, though those helped. What beat her was patience. Garrett didn't yell. He didn't post rants on Facebook. He didn't threaten lawsuits over the fence. He did what 25 years of federal fieldwork taught him to do. He collected evidence, followed the trail, and let the truth do the heavy lifting. And here's the thing about people who abuse power for long enough. They stop being careful. Shelby thought 9 years of running that board without a single challenge made her untouchable. She confused silence with consent. She confused obedience with respect. And she forgot that quiet neighbor on the other side of the fence might know more about soil contamination than anyone in the county. The real lesson? Document everything, know your rights, and never underestimate someone who stays calm when you expect them to break. If you ever dealt with an HOA who acted like the law didn't apply to them, drop a story in the comments. I read every single one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because the story coming up involves a woman who tried to condemn her neighbor's barn. She ended up paying for a barn twice as big. You won't want to miss it.